So I recently held a poll.
Don't care.
Here are 5 more stupid things about the men's rights movement.
Stephen. My brain is a little bit like a hamster's cheeks. It's big, it's round, it's cute, and it can spend a very long time incubating a weapons-grade deposit of mucus and protein and bacterial culture succotash and compacting it down to a concentrated bullet of anal poison, upon whose lacquered shell is keenly scribed the name Steve Shives. Thank you, Stephen. Most people just feed me. You clean me out.
Selective acceptance. Men's rights activists don't typically exhibit terribly positive attitudes toward women.
You're probably never going to understand this, Steve, but treating people like a monolithic victim class is not a positive attitude. Far from it. Well, if you're trying to build an empire, then I guess that's how it's done, but there has to come a time when you stop building the empire. Like, round about when everyone starts losing their fucking minds would be good. I mean, I'm just throwing a dart in a calendar here.
But there are exceptions. For example, women who agree with them that feminism is at best unnecessary and at worst oppressive and misandrist. Or, no, you know what? That's it.
Good, that's all I need. You just proved we don't hate women. If we hated women just for being women, then we would do so regardless of their opinions, and we would have no problem with feminist men. I, for one, do. I have a problem with you, and I don't even care if you identify as a feminist. All you demonstrated is that men's rights activists don't like feminism. Correct, for the most part. Human rights activists don't tend to like ideologies that stand in the way of human rights. That is a considerable vector of the point. MRAs don't like feminists. And WRAs don't like patriarchists. Oh wait, Steve, neither of those last 2 things exist? Have you noticed the fucking world ever?
Women who reject feminism are highly favored by MRAs. They're held up as evidence that theirs is a legitimate ideology.
Ideology, Stephen?
Women who reject feminism is a legitimate ideology. Reject feminism. Ideology. Reject feminism. Ideology.
The only thing you specified about them is they reject feminism, and that's an idea. Not being a feminist is an ideology. Okay, Stephen. I'm really glad your brain hasn't been completely fucking fried by an ideology. What the fuck are you gonna play at? Shives, we're only a minute into your video and you've effectively told me atheism is a religion. How are you gonna fucking do this, Shives? It's looking really bleak.
Based on facts and reasonable assumptions.
All aboard the fail train!
Not a hate movement based on projection, fears of inadequacy, and unhinged misogyny.
It's still just talking about non-feminist women. You're not talking about MRA women. You neglected to include that detail, and I don't think you ever meant to. I just want you to listen to what you just said, because it's not your description of men's rights. It's not even your description of anti-feminism. It's your description of non-feminism.
A hate movement based on projection, fears of inadequacy, and unhinged misogyny.
That is your description of every woman who is not a feminist. You are simply adorable, Stephen.
Anyway, if MRAs hate women so much, why are there women who agree with them?
Well, you see, Stephen, we find ourselves responding to a lot of arguments like this.
It's misogynistic.
And very often in response, some women come forward and say, I think men deserve human rights and I support movements in favour of those rights. Do I hate women? And they are told, yes, you do! Steve, it's a thing called internalized misogyny. If you're a woman who supports men's human rights, it's because you hate yourself and you have Stockholm Syndrome and you have been cynically turned against your own kind.
Funny how that same logic doesn't seem to apply to men who support feminism. Dishonest Denial.
That was an atomic head desk, Steve. I invented it just for you. I hope I never have to do it again.
One of the most interesting phenomena surrounding the men's rights movement is how many men will strenuously deny having any association with it, even while parroting its talking points.
Its talking points, Stephen, are the human rights of men and boys. Did you notice I said men and boys there? That makes me sound like an MRA, because I used that troublesome qualifier, and boys. People will tell you in one breath, nobody's genitals should be mutilated against their will. And in the next breath they will say, I am not a men's rights advocate. Tell me, Steve, do you believe women should have their genitals legally mutilated before they are even adults who can be capable of consenting? And do you think men should have their genitals legally mutilated before they are even 8 days old? If your answer is no, Steve, then you have just advocated for men's rights, making you, by definition, a men's rights advocate. But I am going to piss madly into the wind and stabbily into the dark and take a wild fucking guess that you don't identify as a men's rights advocate, even though you think men are treated unfairly in the family courts, and you will readily advocate that men should have more rights in the family courts. If you express this opinion and someone responds, what are you, a men's rights advocate? You will say, no, I am not a men's rights advocate. Men's rights advocates are scum. And the men's rights movement is hateful. I do, however, advocate that men should have rights. And then, Steve, your head will do that thing where it fucks itself to death every hour on the hour. Just so you can go on living this multi-layered fucking lie where you try desperately to get laid and it doesn't work. And then you will die alone, having devoted your life to completely fucking your species over for no reason.
And really, who can blame them? The men's rights movement is so toxic, so obviously fueled
by lies! From cunts like you!
By bigotry and male insecurity that even people who agree with everything MRAs typically say don't want to be taken for one.
Watch this, Steve.
For example, there are some in the MRM who have pointed out that it's unfair that men in the United States have to register with Selective Service when they turn 18, while women don't have to. I agree. Others have suggested that family courts might be unfairly biased in favor of mothers and against fathers when it comes time to deciding things like child custody. I think that's a serious issue.
You just advocated for men's rights. Are you a men's rights advocate? No. Why not? Because of the things people say about men's rights advocates. What people? You! Steve, you can't talk honestly about your beliefs because you're too busy lying about them! This is you head-fucking yourself down a well! Steve, you are a men's rights advocate based on what you just said, but you will not call yourself a men's rights advocate because you hate men's rights advocates! Because you hate yourself for having the opinions you have. What in the slithering nose fuck is it like trying to exist in your head, Steve? Do you wake up in the morning and because you don't believe in waking up, you hate yourself for the duration of the day because you woke up? You know, I've said before, I'm not proud of being a men's rights advocate because I'd rather live in a society in which that wasn't necessary. But it's looking increasingly like men's rights advocates are the only people who don't live their entire lives as walking contradictions. The statement, I advocate for men's rights, therefore I am a men's rights advocate, is a statement that could be made in all truth by the vast majority of the population. Possibly, and yet the vast majority of the population will not say it. They will lie and say a sentiment to the effect of, I am not a men's rights advocate, but I advocate for men's rights. People don't care anymore, Steve. They don't care that a verb literally means a noun like that. People will make video after video advocating for men's rights, like you just did. And they will just say, no, I'm not a men's rights advocate. This verb is not this noun. I can't use language in its most basic functions because I'd be risking my career. Not because men's rights advocates are bad people, but because I have to keep saying men's rights advocates are bad people. Because I just have to. Because reasons. Do you understand how fucking heroic it is of me to even engage with you on anything resembling an objective platform? I mean, you are actually fucking diseased. Human language was developed tens of thousands of years ago, and you are still completely fucking up how any of it is supposed to work. The fact that this disease has existed since before the advent of mimetic language, and we've continued to allow these diseased people to soil the gene pool with their frankly Mesozoic brains, is frankly a testament to the compassion of mankind. I'm glad I'm at least still proud to be a human.
Luckily, if you're a guy who is sick and tired of being called an MRA when you're not one, there's a real easy fix. Just stop being such a sexist crybaby.
So yeah, if you want to vote, just agree to die in a war. Stop being such a sexist crybaby. If you want any say in the matter of does your country answer to Hillary Clinton or whichever Jehovah's fucking witness they can get to run against her, then you better be prepared to lie in an Afghanistan mountain in 1,000 splattered pieces for the rest of eternity. Shives, you are a dick. The size of the 11th dimension. It's the one curled up inside all the other ones.
Harassment of critics.
Okay, it's time for Random McCam's Law. You ready? If you do not have evidence of harassment, then you do not get to claim harassment. And 25 tweets from delusional Tumblerinas does not count as evidence. Can you adopt that law? And if not, why are you reluctant to adopt that law? Why are you reluctant to relinquish this weapon? See, sometimes I feel harassed. See, if this is not your first video about the men's rights movement, then I've got to say, you're trudging through the ass-leaking, temple-clamping, desperate, self-contradictory misanthropy you call reason, feels very much like you're harassing everyone who supports these human rights. But I'm not going to report to you, Steve, or try to get you banned from the internet, or from real life. Because the fact that I feel harassed is fucking irrelevant, Steve. Which is just as well, because I have arguments that actually stand up to scrutiny on their own merits. I don't need to have my opponents thrown out of the room just to win an argument. I'm confident that you have no fucking idea what I'm talking about, and you never will. It's far more important to you that you stand atop a mountain of murdered men in the hope that a harem of women will be waiting for you at the foot of it. And that would be dangerous, Steve, if there was any chance of it happening. If you weren't such a hyperdimensional loser of every conceivable flavour. Your death will sadden no one. Absolutely no one. It will be a very long time from now and everyone will have forgotten you. Don't worry.
The men's rights movement is reactionary by its very nature.
Yes, we are reacting to something. Once upon a time there was nothing to react to. There was nothing holding men's rights back. And now there is. And we are still reacting to it. It's called the fucking government, Steve. You hate it for doing all the things you hate, but at the same time you can't face a world without it. A world in which there is no hand of God looming over, preventing the jocks from stealing all the women from you. You like to think that without the government, without a system of control, it would just be the biggest, strongest, meanest men taking whatever they want. But it's never been the case, Steve. Not for as long as we've been Homo sapiens. We're an exceptionally social, exceptionally empathetic species. Evolution's already sorted this out for us. But you would much rather believe that man in his natural wild habitat is a monster and a rapist and an abuser. Because that makes you better than the average man. But you're not, Steve. Far from it. You're manifold times worse than the average man from any given period. You cannot survive sufficiently in the wild, and you cannot communicate properly in the information world. You do not belong anywhere except in limbo. Forever rowing on the bottom deck of a slave ship, blindly driving the species from one stage to the next. You're a human engine part, Shives. How does it feel?
It lashes out at women and feminists in particular.
And also men. See, I'm doing it now. See, when we argue with women, you call it harassment, because women can't argue for themselves without you saving them from mean words. And when we argue with men, you call it nothing. You pretend it didn't happen. You probably overlook the observation that I get way more angry and insulting with men than I do with women. Enough to drink absinthe. You're probably going to pretend this response didn't happen. Because you're not going to let a lumpy little thing like the truth get in the way of your agenda to keep women scared and confused so they come running to you. And like I said, it's not going to work, Steve. You're a smug, pasty, useless piece of shit, and women are a lot smarter than you think they are. Well, feminists aren't. They're as dumb as you think and more. And they will indeed fall for this bullshit every time. Feminists don't mind being exploited by other feminists as long as they get their outrage hit.
On a daily basis, feminist writers and activists are deluged with hate mail and death threats from outraged men.
Yeah, Random McCam's Law. If you're just going to sit there and throw shit at the walls, then your comments will be treated as the white noise they are. Show me an example of men doing this to feminists. And I will show you an example of feminists doing it to men. I will show you 10. Every time men's rights activists or gamergators try to gather together in a public place, they are met with death threats and bomb threats and false claims of harassment. If your small group of people has an ethics policy that says anything other than treat women like victims in every conceivable circumstance, no matter how absurd, then you will be bullied out of existence by feminists. And you're right, I haven't supplied any evidence for this in this particular video, but I don't need any, because as a great man often said, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. You believe in a wage gap, you believe in a patriarchy, and you believe men constantly harass feminists and feminists never harass anyone. And I don't have to fucking listen to you, Steve, because you're not trying to reason. You're just pissing on everything in the room in the hope that women will notice that your cock is the only thing that doesn't smell of piss.
Some, like Lindy West or Anita Sarkeesian, are arguably better known for being victims of misogynist harassment than for their actual work.
Steve, that is what a professional victim is. That is their actual work. I get plenty of messages saying shit like, get your opinions off the internet or I'll cut your family, but I don't talk about it because I'm busy entertaining people, making animations and music and amusing polemics. Sarkeesian has no skills and no coherent thoughts. If she didn't damsel, you would never have heard of her. She's like you. The only speciality she has is scaring women and blaming men. You have no fucking idea how to make the world a better place, and you have no intention of making the world a better place. So you find people who are trying to make the world a better place, and you piss on their fucking dreams! Because then you at least feel like you're having an effect on the world. It's like me fucking cutting myself, Steve, except it's an external locus. You do it to the world, Steve. You have to cut other people just so you can feel something. You feeling anything yet?
Others have been driven from the public sphere altogether, which is understandable.
Yes, they demand to be driven everywhere. That's the nobility for you. Or as the French would call them, the noblesse. The revolution didn't go so well after all, did it?
But is also a terrible shame, because that's what the harassers want.
Okay, Sargon's Law. I hope you don't mind me evoking it here, Sargon, but Steve seems to know quite a lot about how the mind of a harasser works. Do go on, Steve.
Unable to intelligently answer their critics, they attempt to intimidate them into silence. And when that doesn't work, when they are unable to overwhelm feminists with the sheer force of abuse...
That's what you're doing now. You want feminists to be scared, and you're trying to keep them perpetually scared. See, I call that abuse, personally. To borrow an analogy, you're like a door-to-door burglar alarm salesman. Lying to a lonely old spinster about how much crime is in the area with no fucking evidence whatsoever. And then I walk past saying, hey, don't listen to that guy, he's talking bollocks. He's just trying to sell you his shitty fucking product that he's been pyramid scammed into hawking. And your reaction to me, Steve, is don't listen to that man. He's abusing and harassing you. You really need this burglar alarm or you're going to get raped by that man. Because you just don't give a fuck, Steve. You don't care who you scare. You don't care who you scam. You just have a suitcase of shitty fucking burglar alarms and you need to sell them so you don't feel like you've thrown your fucking life away on a lie. Well, you have, Steve. Put down the crappy merchandise. Stop terrifying women for no reason and come give me a hug. Okay, it's going to be fine.
They resort to other equally vapid tactics, like derailment and distraction.
Let's try something, Steve. Describe to us what it looks like in your brain when anyone expresses an opinion inclusively in favour of the human rights of men.
Many MRAs engage in a sort of troll guerrilla warfare, infiltrating the comment sections of articles and videos that deal with women's issues, posting responses designed to paralyze discussion with irrelevant bickering.
You are a crazy person, Steve, you are an insane, hateful, emotionally terroristic black hole in the fabric of compassion. Listen to what you're about to say.
Demands that feminists identify legal rights available to men but not to women are common.
Let's just extract those key words, shall we?
Legal rights, irrelevant bickering. Legal rights, irrelevant bickering. Legal rights, irrelevant bickering.
See, up until this point, I've been somewhat filibustering you, Steve, but I've finally reached the point where I don't have to say much. You dug yourself into this hole, I just made it wider. Legal rights, Steve, is irrelevant bickering. Fuck off with your actual discussion of actual legal rights. We're busy lying about men so we can scare women. I mean, it is conceivable, Stephen, that they might one day build a statue of you for this, but that statue is at some point going to be ritually beheaded.
There's also the ever-popular appeal to bigger problems, in which the MRA will express his dismay that feminists aren't more concerned with the plight of women in developing countries or the Muslim world.
Yeah, you're still having the same problem, Steve. The plight of women in developing nations is a human rights issue. And you are not interested in discussing human rights issues. The plight of men in the West is a human rights issue, and you are not at all interested in discussing that. You will pull rabbits out of your ass all night and fuck them to the sound of grindcore, rather than discuss human rights issues, because you do not give a shit about human rights. You only give a shit about finding ever more microscopic reasons to scare women. And I don't know why you do it. I honestly don't know why any of you do it. I've got a few ideas, a few hypotheses, but they are all detrimental to the structural integrity of my faith in humanity. And I need my faith in humanity. It's the only faith I've ever had, Steve. And it has taken a pounding over the years. I can't believe it's still standing.
It's not that he gives a shit about those women, he just thinks that feminists should worry more about them and leave sexist American assholes like him alone.
Given that sexist American assholes like him also face human rights issues. They're essentially saying you should be a human rights advocate instead of a feminist, because those things do appear to be mutually exclusive. It looks remarkably like your feminism is the reason you are not a human rights advocate. That if you weren't ideologically compelled to be obsessed with microaggressions and imaginary harassment and projected rape fantasies, then maybe you would actually give a shit about the people in the world who face legally sanctioned disparities in human rights. Especially given that this includes everyone in the world except Western women.
Still, this isn't the worst thing about the men's rights movement. When it comes to that, it's hard to get more disgusting and inexcusable than rape apology.
You mean when women rape men and you claim it's not rape? And your only reasoning is, well, the Empire says it's not rape, and the law is the law. You can't change it. Unless it's a law I don't like, and then it's legalised cannabis. But if it's make it just as illegal for a woman to force sex on a man as it is for a man to force sex on a woman, it's no! Because reasons. Because equality! See, MRAs don't say rape is good. They don't say rape doesn't happen. Feminists do. Steve, when women rape men, feminists literally say that was not rape. That is actual rape apology. Steve, and the legal system agrees with them. But again, that's an actual, legal, concrete human rights issue. And you don't like those. You find them icky and bickering. You are, once again, only interested in lying to women so you can scare them into sucking your dick. And frankly, Steve, if that doesn't count as rape, mind, body, and soul, then I don't know what does.
Men's rights activists attempt to minimize or dismiss concerns about rape in a variety of ways, ignoring the existence of acquaintance and spousal rape.
Never heard a men's rights activist deny the existence of those forms of rape. I have heard countless social justice fucks like you deny the existence of it happening to men by women. You appear to be doing it now.
Blaming rape victims for being promiscuous or dressing too provocatively.
Allowing your penis to fill with blood because you were nervous.
Spreading fear and paranoia about a non-existent epidemic. False rape allegations.
Do you happen to recall what Rolling Stone just did? And that it is by no means an isolated incident. The epidemic of false rape allegations is happening before your very eyes in duplicate and triplicate, you fucking mental case!
And generally acting as though making rape an easier crime for men to get away with is their primary goal, which it is.
Once again, Steve, you argue with yourself better than I ever can.
Spreading fear and paranoia about a non-existent epidemic of making rape an easier crime for men to get away with, spreading fear and paranoia about rape, spreading fear and paranoia about rape, spreading fear and paranoia about rape. This is not a civil rights movement as it claims to be. This is a hate group.
And you have AIDS. Let's see who comes to your rescue, Steve!
Populated by resentful failures too weak to carry their own baggage.
Have you tried saying this about feminists? Give it a go, Steve. Say about feminists what you just said about us. See what happens. See what they call it when they're reporting it to the police.
They're some of the most pathetic human beings known to me, and...
Because the one you were going to say known to man. That known to me is not... It's not in common parlance. What? Shit, that was quite telling, wasn't it, Steve? I think you know why. Deep down. You replaced men with me. That's your idea of utopia, isn't it? Just you and all the women. Or maybe just 72 of them.
Their only redeeming quality is that they're so much damn fun to smack around.
You're a fucking legend, Steve.
Which is fitting, since most of them seem to think that's all women are good for.
And you have syphilis. Do you see what I'm doing when I do that? When you accuse people of hate and violence with no fucking evidence, you are as good as accusing them of having a disease with no fucking evidence. But when you do it, it's absolutely fine, because reasons. See, I no longer do those sort of straight talking head videos where I just get up here and say feminists are assholes and then just expect everyone to accept my generalizations as gospel without any fucking examples. I start with the example. I've done it 40 times now. I go, here is a feminist. Here is a social justice warrior type. And I let them speak for themselves. And I've given you 40 examples of people who are evidently and identifiably fucked in the head. The latest and quite possibly greatest of which is you, Steve. You are a perfect demonstration of that the hatred of men knows no fucking boundaries whatsoever. It can and will utterly ruin people. You will sit there and say, people who advocate for men's rights are losers who just want to rape and beat women, and in your head there's nothing hateful about that. Because it's the centre of your fucking dial, Steve. It's all you've ever known. No one ever says, right? No one ever says women's rights advocates are violent bigots. Even though many people who advocate for women's rights also happen to be violent bigots, we wouldn't say women's rights advocates are violent bigots because the women's rights advocacy isn't the problem, the violent bigotry is. But if, perchance, you encounter someone who advocates for men's rights and happens to be a violent bigot, and to date, Stephen, you have given us a grand total of 0 examples of such people, right? But in the event of such a person, then for some reason, you can say men's rights advocates are violent bigots and it's because they are men's rights advocates. So fuck any possible movement that might result in any expansion of men's human rights. Because, double think! Because man bad, woman weak, la 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 la, I didn't say that. Fuck you, Steve. Sincerely, fuck you with a poster tube. Shove a fucking ferret down it. Goodbye and fuck you in the ass with a ferret bazooka. You heard me.